There's lots of stories in the tradition where the people told folk tales about actual historical personages. You get it in all cultures, and in the Irish culture, of course. The late great Eamon Kelly drew on stories about Dean Swift, Jonathan Swift, and many stories too about Daniel O'Connell. Daniel O'Connell, the liberator. He was a defender, a legal defender, and he also managed to get through a bill in Parliament in London, Catholic emancipation. So as Eamon said, the clergy had great time for the liberator, Catholic emancipation. So where would they be without it at all, at all? So you can start the clock now, and I'll tell this little story. Eamon used to say that there was a man who in the past had lived in his part of County Kerry who had actually been defended by Daniel O'Connell about 100 years before, and people had stories about a very famous case in which this man had been defended by O'Connell. And the man lived in a place called Lame Naguilla, and his name was Humphrey Carey. And seemingly he was a red rogue, the biggest rogue in the whole area. Well, one time this Humphrey Carey, he was at the fair and he sold a cow to a farmer. And once the farmer had paid him, the farmer says to Carey, he says, "Would you mind hanging on to this cow for a while? I have to go down the town to do a few quick messages." "That's fine," says Carey. Well, Carey's there and he's got the cow with them. And up comes another farmer. And this other farmer says to him, "Would you be going selling that cow?" "Of course I am," says Carey. "You don't think I'm going dancing with her, do you?" So he sells the cow to the second man for an even higher price. And he decided he better make himself scarce now. So he runs off and heads off on the road home. Not too long after that, the original farmer who bought this cow, he's coming back to the marketplace. And as the second farmer is bringing his cow out through the gate of the marketplace, the other man accosts him and says, "Where are you going with that cow?" "I'm bringing this cow home." "Oh, no, you're not. That's my cow." "Not at all. It's my cow, you robber. Who are you calling a robber? What's your verbs?" And Derter is minnick a brishin bail shron dinner. There are no bones in the tongue, but the tongue can break a man's nose. Well, the two fellas, they lay into each other and they're giving it what for, and they're dancing around and the jukes are up and their eyes are flaring and they're pasting each other. Anyway, one word has led to another and the thing has gotten out of hand. A big crowd has gathered because there's nothing to draw a crowd like a fight, of course. In the meantime, the cow, she's standing there and she manages to untangle herself from all this ree-raw and rulya-boolia and heads off on the road home. In fact, she catches up with Humphrey Carey as he's arriving at the gate of his own house. He's delighted, of course. He goes into the house and there's his wife. And I may tell you, she was as crooked as her husband, Humphrey Carey. He says to her, "Hold out your apron there." And she holds out the apron, and into the apron doesn't Humphrey Carey dump twice the price of the cow. And the second price was even higher than the first one, and points out into the yard, and there's the cow. Well, she gives a hearty laugh. But you know, as they say, no matter how long a rogue can run, he'll always be caught up with by the end of the day. Meanwhile, back in the marketplace, these two fellas are duking it out, and they're getting weary now from welting each other black and blue. They look around and the cow is gone. So what are they fighting for? So they go to the peelers and they tell the peelers about what had happened. And the peelers, of course, put the law into motion. And after coming across some little vital morsels of information and evidence, they track Humphrey Carey back to his own front door. They finally turn up there and they issue a summons to him. And they say he has to appear at the end of the month at the local petty sessions, for as Eamon said, and that's what the court was called in them days. So after they head off, Humphrey Carey, he's in a bit of a pucker, he's in a bit of a pickle, and he's thinking, I'm very shaky ground here, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this caper. Anyway, he remembers that Daniel O'Connell, he had rooms in the town square, and he said, I'll go and see Daniel O'Connell. So he turns up at O'Connell's place, and he says to O'Connell, I want to hire you to defend me in this case. And he shows him the docket, the summons. Well, O'Connell looks at this summons and he says, I'm not going to defend you. People, everyone knows you're the biggest blackguard in the whole of the province of Munster. I can't defend you. Oh, says Humphrey Carey, a blackguard, isn't this a nice thing to be called by a councillor like the great Dan O'Connell? Because people say that if Daniel O'Connell was around at the time of the fallen angels, then the devil would still be in heaven. Well, now Daniel O'Connell began to laugh there because, like all these big fellas, he loved being praised. So he thought for a moment and he says, right, I'll take on the case. It'll cost you £100, but listen here. You have to do exactly what I tell you in court, to the letter. So then he gives the 1, 2, 3 to Humphrey Carey of how Carey is supposed to conduct himself in the court. So here we are in the court. And here's Humphrey Carey, and he's sitting there in the box. And in his hand, he's got a big half-stone brown paper bag. And when he's asked a question by the judge, he dips into this bag and turns to the judge and says, have a bullseye. Any question he's asked, whether it's by defense or prosecution, he answers the same way, have a bullseye, have a bullseye. And this goes on, and the only answer he'll give to any question is, have a bullseye. Well, the judge gets very vexed, and he calls up the peelers and says, what's the meaning of you bringing this total Ludramon, this Amadon, in front of me here today? And he takes the docket, you know, the charge sheet, and he takes out his quill pen, and he crosses a line through it, and underneath he writes, unfit to plead. So when Humphrey Carey went out through the door of the courthouse that day, he went out as a free man. Well, he's only halfway down the main street when up comes running Daniel O'Connell, laughing his head off and in great form. He says, oh, Carey, you're an awful actor altogether. You did exactly what I told you to do in the courtyard, in the courthouse there today. Now, what about my £10 fee? And Humphrey Carey looks up at Daniel O'Connell and he says, have a bullseye. Shin Mishkel.